Ciao, welcome to Beatspot. I'm Marco, and in this video I'm walking you through the new mix starter rack I made to get you started with mixing and also speed up your workflow. So let's dive into it. So this rack features several chains. We have drum hits, drum bass, bass, instruments, vocals, and quick fixes, and each one has been tailored on my experience and on the tools I use the most, I want to use when dealing with a certain source. So let's start with the drum hits. So each chain starts with a correction module. For example, for the drum hits, we have the align delay, we have utility, we have shifter to fine tune, to kind of to tune the drums instead of going with the transposing, because it kind of fucks up the drum hits, especially the transients. Then we have the gate and a simple low pass, high pass filter. And then we have the enhancement. This is kind of the creative mixing where we are giving some character to the whole sound. So we have the drum bass. You can use the hot swap feature to find some presets you want. Then we have low end bump, and it's meant to be used with the resonance knob in mind. So you just give some more oomph, some more weight to the kick drum especially. And then we have the boost and cut that can be controlled here with the macros. And it's the pull tech boost and cut trick basically. And then we have the upward compressor, and it's set at 1:1 by default, but you can kind of squeeze or tighten the envelope like this. If you go in the red zone, you are making it tighter. If you are going in the blue zone, you are making it fatter, you are squashing it, you're bringing up the low level signal. Then we have a tonal EQ, two simple shelves, and then we have an expander, a saturator, and you can play with the bass knob here in the macro. Then we have, and the bass knob is useful on low hand heavy sounds like the kick drum. And then we have the corrective EQ, so you can just notch or fix whatever problem you have in your sound. And finally we have the disperser, mainly for kicks. So it's a phaser with a single notch. We have the center frequency that you can play with, generally between 100 and 250 hertz, but you are free to go outside that range. The spread at 0, the blend at 0, and you can basically tackle the muddiness and correct the phase. So this is something you generally want to listen to when the bass is playing to. So you can find the ideal phase correlation you want, and that's it. Then we have the texture. So we have erosion and vinyl distortion, and finally we have spectrum. Then let's go to the drum bass. So the same thing for the correction. We have a line, utility, gate, and low pass filter. We don't have the shifter because you don't shift the whole drum bass. And for the enhancement, we have the drum bass, we have the low end bump, boost and cut, we have a glue compressor, upward compressor still, we have the tonal EQ, expander too, we have a saturator, corrective EQ, and then we have a de-esser, especially for the cymbals, which can be kind of problematic. Then we have the texture module, and in this case it has been set in parallel because you don't want to really fog up the whole drum bass, so you just want to add the flavor in general. So I set it like this. And then we have a space, so we have a dry channel and a drum room with this kind of slapback and a drums room reverb. You can play with whatever preset, whatever settings. This is just a slapback and a drums room, which are kind of the default processing, special processing for drum basses. And then we have the clipper. So this is basically just a clipper. You don't touch it. We have the threshold at 0 dB, the ratio at 10, so it doesn't catch lower peaks. And we have the soft clip enabled, so that's it. So let's go with the bass chain. So we have line delay, utility, gate, an auto filter, just in case you want to low pass it, and a peaks tamer, just in case you are working with some slapped bass or whatever kind of source that has some high peaks that don't contribute much to the whole performance, so you just tame them with this module. And then in the enhancement we have the erosion, which is kind of unusual, but it's great to add some texture that sounds well on smaller speakers, and it can also add some grit, and it's great when you feed it into the distortion module. So here we have some things going on. We have a dry channel, then we have overdrive, amp, pedal, and redux, and you can use one of them or all of them, and you can play with different tones and try achieving a sort of distortion sandwich, which is a great technique for full harmonically rich basses. So you just experiment with it. Then we have the upward compressor, we have the low end bump, we have the boost and cut, we have the tonal EQ, we have the saturator. With the bass one, it's turned down by default because in general on basses you want to kind of squeeze out the mid-range and the high end and don't touch the low end. So it's set at -36 by default, but you are free to play with it. Then we have the corrective EQ, We have the disperser too, same thing as for the kick drum, and we have a simple limiter, and at the end of it we have sidechain compression. So now let's go with the instruments. So for the correction module, we have line delay, utility, gate, low pass, high pass filter, and the peaks tamer too. And for the enhancement, we have glue compressor first, saturator, upward compression, the same distortion module as before, tonal EQ, corrective EQ, and limiter. Then we have the texture with the erosion and dividing distortion. We have the space, so we have delay, phaser, flanger, chorus ensemble, reverb, and EQ8. And this order is not random, has been something I thought about, and this is generally the safest signal flow. You are free to play with it, but in general you want to play with the delay first. So then we have all the delay, the dry and the delay signal going into the phaser flanger. Then we're playing with the chorus, and finally we have the reverb. It's important to have the reverb as the very last processor, spatial processor, because otherwise you are kind of delaying the reverb or you're coursing the reverb, which can be nice, but generally this is the safer option. And then you can fine tune the tone and the resonances with the EQ8. Finally, we have the limiter, the sidechain compression, and the spectrum by default. Now let's go with vocals. So in the correction, we have line delay, utility, low pass, high pass filter, gate, and the peaks tamer too. And for the enhancement, we have glue compressor, saturator, upward compression, tonal EQ, corrective EQ, a de-esser, and limiter. So I didn't include the distortion module because that's kind of a creative aspect of vocals. So I thought about this chain keeping the vocals clean or in general intact, but you can drag and drop or copy and paste the distortion module if you want to experiment with it, or use third-party plugins for some like flavor, for some new tone that you want to add into it. And then for the space, same thing as the instruments. And finally we have limiter, sidechain compression, which is something that you can use or not use. It depends if you are using like heavy kick drums, heavy snare drums, whatever that you want to kind of duck the vocals. It's a plus. It's there. You can leave it like that. Finally, we have a quick fixes chain. So if you are mixing like a riser, an impact, or a sound effect, whatever that doesn't have to follow some rule of thumbs, you have the utility, the EQ8, the saturator, the compressor, and the limiter, and that's it. You can just place it into its pocket, and that's it. It's really a simple chain that you have already there, and it's ready to use. So an important thing I want to mention about this chain is that it doesn't affect the sound at all by default. So you can drag and drop it on whatever sound, and it's not imparting a sound by itself. If you use a parallel flip polarity audio effect track, if you just like do the null test, it sounds silent. So that's because I don't want to kind of impose a sound. These are just some tools that you are able to tweak, to turn on and off, and you can do whatever you want. This is just a collection and a settings of tools ready to use, so you don't have to keep dragging and dropping all the effects and think about the signal flow from scratch. That's it. It's ready to use. It's ready for you. So I hope you enjoyed it, and you can find it at the link in the description below. Let me know what you think about it, and see you in the next one.